In this lesson, we will do a deeper dive on what dependencies and relationships to tasks are available in Microsoft Project. In an earlier lesson, we learned how to do simple task linking between tasks. These techniques should work for all versions starting from Microsoft Project 2013 all the way to the most current versions of Project. Before we get started, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to this channel, and hit the bell so that you get notifications when I publish a new video. Now let's talk about the difference between dependencies and relationships when it comes to task links in Microsoft Project. These two words basically mean the same thing. When talking in broad terms about planning and scheduling, we use dependencies because it is more agnostic, but in Microsoft Project, we use the term relationships. So it is more common to hear a question like, what is a relationship between tasks? In the previous lesson, we learned how to link tasks that were dependent on each other, which means they have a relationship to each other. We only created finish to start relationships. This is usually referred to an FS relationship. So what other types of relationships do we have in project scheduling? Remember, these relationships are used on most advanced scheduling tools to include Microsoft Project, Primavera, and others. These relationships include 4 types. You have finish to start, or FS, finish to finish, or FF, start to start, SS, and start to finish, SF. Let's talk a little about each of these relationships. In the example we have here, we have task A and task B. Since they have a finish to start relationship, this means that task B cannot start until task A has finished. And you can clearly see it here when you see the arrow that goes from the end of task A to the start of task B. Our current schedule that we have open have finish to start relationships. But how can you tell in Microsoft Project? Well, since finish to start relationships are what most of your schedule should have, around 90% of your schedule, then Microsoft Project doesn't need to show that it is an FS relationship or finish to start relationship. So we're going to look here at the schedule I have open, and you can see that I already have it all here from beginning to end, and I have this task pane open up. I'm going to close it for now. I'm going to right click on my Gantt chart in the white area, and I'm going to uncheck show split, and you can see my whole schedule right here. And you can see that I have all predecessors and successors, except in the summary task lines. You should never have predecessors and successors. And you can see that it's summary task line because if we have the column summary, it will say yes. So it's a summary line. You can also see that our beginning task does not have a predecessor because nothing happened before it. And you can see at the end, our finished task does not have a successor because there's no task that come after it is done. So here all you see are numbers. So how do you know how this predecessor are actually finished to start? Well, like I said, in Microsoft Project, I said in scheduling, finish to start is the most common relationship. So Microsoft Project does not put it in its predecessor successor. But if we right click in our Gantt and we choose show split, I'm going to show here predecessor name and successor name. If you don't see predecessor name on the left right here, you see resources or something like that, you need to right click on the gray area of your bottom pane and then go ahead and choose predecessors and successors. And that should fix that. So right here you can see for project planning and resource, this line we have right here, it shows the predecessor name is authority to proceed or line 3. So line 3 comes before line 4. And right here it says the type. The type is FS, so finish to start. So if we go through each one of these, you'll see that the FS is not different because all our tasks are linked right now, finish to start. Okay, whichever have links. We do not have links for summary tasks, like I said before. Okay, if we go in here where it says type, if we open it up, we can choose one of 4 type of relationships, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So we can see that we have used one type of relationship already. The next relationship we will talk about is the finish to finish relationship. In this example, we have task C and task D. This means that task D cannot finish until task C has finished. If you take a look at task D, it has a task predecessor ID of 5. Then you see an FF following the predecessor ID. This is because Microsoft Project needs to know when a predecessor has a finish-to-finish relationship with FF. So you will have to manually type it in or choose it in your pane to change it. I would suggest you use a pane because it's easier to use. If we go back to the finish-to-start relationship, you will notice it doesn't have FS after the task predecessor ID. So as you can see, all of these are that type of relationship, FS, or finish-to-start. This is because a finish-to-start relationship should be the most common type of relationship in a schedule, like we talked about it before. As a general rule, it will be ideal to have your schedule have about 85 to 90% of finish-to-start relationships. Now let's try this type of relationship in our schedule, the finish-to-finish relationship. We talk to our project team and they tell us that they are sure that they can finish cargo modifications. So let's scroll over. Let's open this up a little bit. And you can see they show that cargo modification. They think that they can finish that at the same time that the engine modification is going to be completed. So we can go ahead and put a finish-to-finish relationship to the predecessor engine modification. So right here, we can actually see that engine modification line 16, so it's the predecessor to this task. So we can actually click in here and put FF. So let's go ahead and do that. Click in here, and then you just put FF, and then click away. And notice when we click away, what's going to happen here in the Gantt, okay? So we're going to click away, and you can see that task modification. You could also see it in your dates. You can do Control Z to undo and then see what dates were before and then see the dates that happened after. You can see here that this changed and now it starts at the end of engine modification and it points to the end of cargo modification. You can also go look down here in the pane and you can see we're in cargo modification and the predecessor is engine modification and now the type is FF. If we undo, if we go in here and we delete the FF, we'll go back to finish to start. So let's go back and you can see it's finished to start and the dates have changed again. To do that again, the other way we can do it to make it a little bit easier, instead of clicking in the predecessor column, especially we have like 5 predecessors or more, it's easier to come in here in this task form pane at the bottom of our schedule and go to type, do the drop down menu and click FF, and you always have to click OK so it takes the changes. So click OK and you'll see the dates change right here. So before we do, so we're going to click OK and there you see that the dates changed. And you can see clearly that we have an FF relationship for this predecessor and we have an FF relationship for the successor of this line, which is the same thing. In the next example, we have a start-to-start relationship. We see that task F cannot start until task E has started. Notice in the predecessor column for task F, it has the task 8 as a predecessor, then it finishes with an SS. You will need to add an SS after the task predecessor ID so that Microsoft Project knows that you want these tasks to have a start-to-start relationship. Okay, so you can clearly see it here with the link, the arrow going from the start of task E down to the task F. We also find out that engine modification on our schedule can start at the same time as the wing modification. So as you can see right here in engine modification, the predecessor is line 15, so the line right above it. And you can also see it on your bottom pane that the predecessor to engine modification is wing modification. So here we want to change it to a start-to-start relationship. So right here, I'm going to go and do the drop down under type column in my bottom pane, and then go choose SS, which is start-to-start relationship. I have to click OK to make it change, but before we do that, notice here the line 15 and line 16, what happens when we put a start to start relationship. Can you guess what's going to happen to engine modification task when we do that and the rest of the schedule? So let's go see if that happens. Just take a little bit of time to think about it. I'm going to click OK. And now we can clearly see that engine modification has a predecessor of the wing modification, and it has engine modification can start at the same time of wing modification. So we can also see that clearly here in our predecessor and successor, it has the SS signifying that it's a start to start relationship. One thing I do need to caution you is that when you use these type of relationships, you need to make sure that you don't lose or leave hanging dependencies in your schedule. Like this one right here, we do not have a clear indication when this task ends, what happens next. So if we need to put one, I would say that we need to put a predecessor between this one and between wing modification and cargo modification. So we can add that, or you can do that later, okay? I'm going to add it right now. I'm going to say that the wing modification as successor will be cargo. So I'm going to put 17 right here, and I'm going to click OK. And now we have that, and we don't have a dangling dependency on our schedule. Okay, that's a little bit more advanced, but I just wanted to point it out so that you have a clear view and you can look for those things. If you didn't understand what happened there, that's okay. We can keep going. Just try to make sure you understand the different types of relationships. All right, so and finally, we have the start to finish relationship. This type of relationship is rarely used. I would recommend not to use it unless you have a specific case that requires it. In all my years of scheduling, I have not seen in practice any circumstance where it made sense to use this type of relationship. I would recommend avoiding it. So for your knowledge, in a start to finish relationship, we have task G must start before task H can finish. So as you can clearly see it in the image, that task G has a link that goes an arrow to the end of task H. So that is the type of relationship we want to avoid because it really doesn't happen much in nature. There might be one or two instances out of thousands of instances that you will need to use it. But like I said, I've never been faced with an instance myself. I will not show an example of how to use this type of relationship since it's not advisable to use. And this project does not really have a clear place to where that type of relationship can be used. So that's it. Go ahead and play around with adding different types of relationships to your task on your schedule. In this lesson, you learned how to add predecessors with different types of relationships to your schedule in Microsoft Project. These types of relationships are finish to start, finish to finish, and start to start. Now go practice and I'll see you in the next lesson.